Assalamu alaikum and welcome to a new conversation between Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri and Professor Akbar Ahmed. On behalf of the Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri Foundation, I welcome you today, and we are thrilled to have a conversation between two friends. It's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Akbar Ahmed, who's the holder of the Ibn Khaldun Chair of Islamic Studies at the American University in Washington, DC. He's combined a distinguished career in both the civil service to Pakistan as well as in the field of scholarship. And apart from his academic work, he has made a feature film, numerous documentaries, and has been involved in many literary endeavors. As an analyst, a commentator, and a teacher, his contribution to creating better understanding in this world is notable. Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri, as most of you know, is a Muslim sage inspired by the rich heritage of irfan, of gnosis, and tasawwuf, Sufism in Islam, and he's a lucid expositor of the science of self-knowledge and awakening to the fullness of human consciousness. We look forward to this conversation between two friends. Bismillah.
Bismillah. Thank you, Mona. Shukran.
Bismillah, 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 Bismillah. I'm delighted to be talking to you. And I really mean that, in that there are very, very few people in this world who have had this sweeping experience of what is across, if you like, cultures, across religious, across north, south, east, west, with a heart that is anchored in what we consider to be true, real, honest, non-changing, what I call the absolute. So I'm really delighted, and I would like to explore the possibilities of seeing how many different levels and layers there are for the discovery of Ibn Khaldun, which was not unique. Anybody with a bit of contemplation will discover the dual currents within the life that we experience. And dual currents are at numerous, if you like, phases, levels, as well as zones. At the personal level, at the subconscious level, at the social level, at the economic level. Look at just now what we are experiencing in the world. We have now been championing for the last few decades, democracy, democracy, democracy. Everybody was one vote, one. So as an ego, I wouldn't like to be excluded. I like to be considered to be the same as everybody else. But when it comes to fears, anxieties, the need for expertise, I will prefer any minute some sort of an authority, autocracy, or even whatever, theocracy even, that may save me. So I have these two sides. One, as an ego, as a human being, I like to be given the same treatment of potential progress, because we're all driven to rise higher and higher in consciousness. So I want, as a human, I've got a soul, and the souls are exactly the same everywhere at all times, which is infinite and absolute. So we're all aspiring to that. So as a human being, I like democracy. But times of difficulties, crisis, need to really rise above bickering and all of the other misery that we are experiencing nowadays. I would rather have autocracy that may lead me out of it. The Roman Empire was based on that. One day you have an emperor and so on, one day it's the republic, one day, and on and on and on. Dualities permeate every aspect of life. I like to be serious and sincere and honest and also sure and certain. But equally, I am most of the time in doubt. These are together. You know, I feel content and so on, but equally, I know there is any minute I can be at a point that I need something, desire something, which means discontentment. So multiples of these dualities permeate, if you like, the spectrum of life. And this is what I was hoping. Dr. Ahmed will tell me that they are doing this sort of thing in his institute. because that is what life is about: duality, 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 and the ever constant pursuit of seeing the oneness within that.
Shaykh, thank you so much. First of all, let me say what a pleasure it is to be talking to you. I have very fond memories of our meetings in England, of praying behind you in your house, I recall, about Jamaat, and I think mid-90s. And here we are connecting again, and I would like to thank Mona and Abbas for arranging this. Yes, these questions you're raising, which are really fundamental to human beings and human nature, are exactly those that are engaging me. I don't see it so much in terms of duality. I think that's a dangerous tangent to go into, and really at the end there's no answer to that. Because to us as Muslims, or as Jews, or as Christians, ultimately it's about the unity, it's about Tawheed, it's about Wajidul Wujud, which we are aiming to find, because in that oneness we are ultimately closer to God and are able to worship God in a very direct way. So I want to go back to the two great examples I give. When you talk about the crises, you talk about the things that are happening in our world, the pandemic, the climate change, these terrible conflicts, the hatred, the anger, the envy that we are seeing in America today, unbelievable sights, unbelievable. And yet this is happening. How do we cope with this? How do we, as Muslims, as non-Muslims, as ordinary human beings, how do we cope with this? People are having nervous breakdowns, their suicides are up. So obviously, mankind is in distress. And I think then, Shaykh, of two great figures, Jalaluddin Rumi and Ibn al-Arabi, and place them in the context of their time, their culture. And if you think we are having a difficult time, think of what they were going through. On the eastern frontiers, you have the storm, the tsunami of the Mongols. And you know, they came like an atom bomb when they hit Baghdad. Nothing was left. It was like two atom bombs, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, landing on them. Hundreds of thousands of people slaughtered, all the books thrown into the rivers. The Khalif, the symbol of empire, rolled up into carpets and squashed like meat. And then you think of Ibn Arabi, who's coming from Andalusia, and he is facing, or Muslims are facing, the Crusaders. So you have wave upon wave of Crusaders arriving in the Middle East and literally slaughtering whoever they could get hold of. Whether they've got hold of Christians, local Christians, they would say, you're not even Christian, slaughter them. Jews, they would say, no, you're not even Christian, slaughter them. Or Muslims. And they did terrible things. You know, these things are not mentioned, but they raped nuns in Constantinople, in the Hagia Sophia, which then was a cathedral. So you have on the eastern frontier and you have on the western frontier. And at the heart of this, Ibn Arabi and Rumi have to find a solution. How are they able to live with their faith, with their integrity, with their idea and knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the answer is both of them coming from very different, and there's the speculation whether they met or didn't meet, but both of them come up with the answer of love, compassion, kindness, and which, as you know very well more than me, defined the very nature of God, Rahman and Rahim. And this is reflected in their poetry, both in Rumi and Ibn Arabi. So there is a great lesson that for us in the midst of all this, we need to really rise, transcend our environment and our situation. Very difficult, easy to say, very difficult to do. And within that, there's salvation. Within that, there's salvation. And then you can reach out. If you go out to the Christians and you see Jesus, who symbolizes this kind of human compassion, human love. If you go out to Judaism, and again, you have these great figures within Judaism, which we share, who are also representing this tradition of reaching out and embracing the other. You remember the famous example of Hillel the Elder, who was asked to define Judaism, standing on one leg, and to define all of Judaism. And he said, standing on one leg, he said, all the religious sacred text can be reduced to one phrase: do unto others as you want them to do unto you. And he said, the rest is all commentary. This is Judaism. So we have models in our own history. And I'm just mentioning two. There are many, many, particularly in that phase of history, which we call the golden age of Islam. We have a time of scholarship of Muslims and Jews and Christians reaching out to knowledge, to ilm, to promoting knowledge, to bringing people together. And sometimes, Shaykh, like you and I, running into trouble. So you have these strange situations where Al-Ghazali, one of the great figures of that time, Al-Ghazali, the great scholar, his books are burnt in Andalusia, and he's declared a heretic. Ibn Rushd is chased out of Cordoba, and he dies very unfortunately the way he dies at the end with this great philosopher. And he's tripped up, as you know, Sheikh, on a very strange charge. He's accused of blasphemy because his critics say he has done shirk, which is associate something or someone with God. And he has associated Venus, the Roman goddess of love and beauty. So he had actually quoted Aristotle, he was translating Aristotle, but his critics picked that up and used it as an opportunity to criticize him. A very narrow-minded and mean thing to do, but they did it. And it ended in his exile, his books being burned. So in spite of that, they continued. They had the same challenges, but they continued. So I think for us human beings, while we have these huge problems and sometimes we despair, we feel maybe we may not be able to survive them, we also have the answer. We have the challenge and we have the solution. That's what I believe. Maybe I'm being naive, and I certainly would like you to throw some light on this.
Wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'd like to go back again to become your student. Really, it's wonderful.
I am your student, Sheikh.
I really mean that. Now, I want to take up again that issue of duality and oneness. I think this is a key fundamental issue in life. How did the Big Bang begin? What does it mean that everything happened within that first second? I look at it as a very basic, if you like, investigative science and, if you like, human heritage and knowledge, in that there are two zones always. Whatever we experience, I sleep and I wake up. I breathe in, I breathe out. I like and I dislike. I am born and I will die, on and on and on. So without going too much into trying to put duality or plurality or multiplicity on a pedestal, all what I'm saying is that there are two of me. One of me is the human side, and my only salvation is by humanity, generosity, give to others what you want to keep, etc., etc., all of that, so as I take my humanity to the edge of its origin, which is divinity. So I can only actually in any way function by accepting that I am here with a duty, and a very essential and pressing duty, to accept duality, deal with it. If it is unjust, say something, do something, object to it, or if you can't, leave it and run away. This is one side, but the other side, there is perfection beyond space and time. So I am too a touch of the divine light, which is the Quran, and all of the other scriptures are full of it. He says, I blew into him from me. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِ. So I cannot survive, I cannot accept it actually as even semi-just unless I realize and experience that I've been given a touch of the divinity to act as a human and to be tested, as the Quran and the Bible and all of them says, meaning لِيَبْلُوكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, so that I act with constant reference and deference to the source itself, to the divine itself, not taking it upon me that I am now demigod. I'm given the opportunity to, in a way, have a choice, lift my hand or don't, speak or don't. I have a choice, but I have no freedom. It is all as a result of my previous activities, thoughts, lack of thoughts, prayers. Transcendence is the key thing. The more often I transcend my mind, the more I am able to touch my soul. So my story is that I am a spirit which is divine and quantum, if you like. It's not subject to space and time. It's mysterious. It is not in any way conditional. And from that zone, from my soul or spirit, comes its earthly presence, which is through the mediation of the mind. So without a mind, I am stupid. With a mind, I am confused and causing havoc. So the answer lies, do your best as a mind, as a human, humane, do to others as they want to be, as you want to be done to you, and all of that. But until you are able to enter into the zone of the Kaaba in your heart, of that silence, of divine presence, of absolute oneness, not relative oneness. So until I do that, I remain insecure. And the more I do that, the more my worldly situation becomes supra efficient, not just super efficient. It brings in another aspect without me trying to be something special or extra. No, I still remain the same human with all the potential faults, mistakes, angers, and injustices, and so on. But if I have that constant reference to the zone of the absolute, then none of these matter. None of them is going to in any way overwhelm me. I understand it in that human beings are evolving from one little cell, few billions of years who experienced life, and therefore is obsessed with life, wants to preserve life. Anything that is ever alive wants to live, and therefore it continues, procreates, and so on. So until with the rise in intelligence, as the Adamic thing is, which happened maybe 100, 200,000 years ago, something occurred in that consciousness that this being was aware of awareness of awareness. Something happened that enabled what we call transcendence. Stop everything, do everything, use your mind, do your whatever, but then enter into another zone of consciousness, which is the source of every other zone of consciousness. And that is calibration. That puts things in full perspective. Without that, we remain as we are, blaming, claiming, muddling, and so on. And earlier than that, we always hope, we always wish, we have romantic notions, we cry, we pray, we do all kinds of things. But ultimately, it's going to be the issue of being able to silence the mind completely and hold it. That is bliss. That is what near-death experience, so many other also people say, it is beyond description. It is the most wonderful thing. And so, but it has to be done consciously and by will and through higher intelligence, through supra-intelligence. Ordinary intelligence, you can be very wicked and very intelligent at a human level. And you can be more intelligent in other. Ultimately, the intelligence itself emanates from the absolute. And the absolute is beyond the mind. Don't deny the mind, don't destroy the mind, don't try to go beyond it through drugs, through others. Just quietly put it aside for a little while. This is all what I know. And I think Ibn Khaldun must have had a moment like that when he suddenly saw the seesaw of dualities. You build a civilization, you build a place, a bit of a culture, a bit of this, and the wilderness and outside comes and overwhelms us. The same thing with us. People who are most civilized, most able to afford everything and so on, they love to experience sheer wilderness and the wild, where anything can happen. We are that. We are between two poles. One is the earthly, reason, rationality, understanding, or from which science is one major strand, and the other one is none at all, is beyond. And that is why even some of our so-called leaders who bring in chaos and all of that, there is a certain attraction in that they bring about, if you like, that possibility of renewal through destruction. We are odd people. We are between middle people, as all of them say, including the Buddhists. Middle between the absolute, you can't describe it, it's a spirit, and earthly creature, earthly animal, who had learned a lot. So my hope is that using your knowledge, experience, wisdom, and the position you are, to expand and in a way explode the gift that came to us historically from Ibn Khaldun. At his time, that was the most noticed thing. But at our time, wherever I look is the Ibn Khaldun story. Here he is, so civilized, so this, that, and then suddenly he does something which is utterly chaotic, which is impossible to comprehend by mind. It is the soul. It's the call of the infinite. You will bring about destruction to everything unless you balance the two. That the divine is in me, I have to calibrate with that light, otherwise the rational or the clever or the most powerful wealth in me will cause havoc. So this is what I was hoping we can share. And with that, I mean, if you move in that direction, and there are many students doing their different degrees, masters or PhDs, using these dozens of strands of dualities, I would be delighted to really be in any way with you as somebody who enjoys to see the truth in that way. The truth is absolutely.
Sheikh, I'm delighted you moved into metaphysics and religious metaphysics, because that's where we are now in terms of our dialogue at present. As I see it, Ibn Khaldun is again one of those great original thinkers of world history. He may have happened to be a Muslim, but he's one of the greatest thinkers in history. Now remember what he calls his subject, Ilm al-Imran, that is the science of humanity, of mankind. This is a very important point I'm making in terms of what you've just expostulated. You've given us a theory, an outline of a theory, and put this notion of Ibn Khaldun exploring Ilm al-Imran, that is the knowledge of community, of humanity, of mankind, and put it in that context. How I see it is like this. There's Ibn Khaldun, but he's not a one-off. I think it's wrong just to say there's Ibn Khaldun, although I'm such a fan of his. You have a whole series of incredible contemporaries. These are great philosophers who are coming one after the other. You have Ibn Rushd, you have Ibn Arabi in Andalusia, then in the middle of the Muslim world, you have Al-Ghazali. To the east, you have Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and you have Al-Farabi, you have Al-Baruni, you have these giants across the Muslim world. And we must never forget, when we say Muslim world, it wasn't the fragmented, discordant nature of Islam as you're seeing today. It was a unified Muslim world. There were problems, there were dynasties falling and rising, but there was something called a Muslim world. One civilization, one language, Arabic language, and a culture, an adab, which would be recognized from Cordoba in Andalusia right up to Bukhara in Central Asia. So you take the great philosophers first, the ones who came earlier. I've mentioned these great philosophers. And if you line up their thinking in terms of what you have been raising about duality and creation and the Big Bang, you will notice that there is a near unanimity on three central issues of religious metaphysics. Number one, creation. Was the universe always there, or was it created, whether by a Big Bang, by whatever, or by an order of God, but it came into being? That's one big central issue being discussed. Number two, the nature of God. Does God know everything we are doing, each one of us as individuals, all the time? Or does he keep an eye on us as humanity in a broad and general sense? So he's God, he's omnipotent, but he knows we are there, but he doesn't really involve himself in too many details. And third, of course, the great issue of resurrection. Will there be a resurrection? If there is a resurrection, in what form will it take? Will it be the soul and the body together? Will it be just the soul? Will it be exactly as we are, and so on? Now, on all these 3 points, the great Muslim philosophers are unanimous. Ibn Sina gets in trouble, as you know, because he disagrees with 2 of these points. And Ghazali will attack him in his famous book, The Incoherence of the Philosophers. And he will say that Ibn Sina's got it wrong because his position contradicts Islam. And that, of course, is dangerous within the Islamic frame. because Ibn Sina is going back to Aristotle and the Greeks, who disagree with all 3 points. So the Muslim philosophers have already reached a position where they are more or less unanimous on these 3 central issues of religious philosophy or metaphysics. Now we come to Ibn Khaldun, and his genius is that as a religious scholar, and all these Muslim philosophers I need to point out are great religious scholars. They're great theologians. It isn't like they're just dabbling. What we do in this age, they're actual philosophers of religion. So they've learned the Holy Quran. They are Hafiz by the age of 10. They're also geniuses in astronomy and mathematics and all kinds of religion disciplines, because they believe all these disciplines point to one thing and one thing alone, and that is the understanding and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we come to Ibn Khaldun, again, remember he's coming from that context and in that cultural environment. He's been in Andalusia, he's been in North Africa, he's become a minister, and he's been put in jail, and he's escaping, and he lands up in Cairo. He loses all his possessions in a shipwreck, his family is lost, and yet he emerges. Yet he has enough faith to re-emerge and write some of the greatest perceptive writing in world history. What is he saying? And as a fan of Ibn Khaldun, I've been studying him, and it's difficult to just study him in one gulp. You need to spend a lifetime. And what I take from him is that he is looking at societies as an organic whole, and he's analyzing what keeps society alive and active and able to change things beyond their own entity as organic creatures. And that is asabia, the notion of social cohesion. So Ibn Khaldun's thesis, very simply put, is that these fresh tribes come in from the hills or the deserts. They come to the cities and they interact with the Arabs who are settled. And he calls them, now remember I'm quoting Ibn Khaldun, he finds them effete, corrupt, weak, soft. So the tribes are hard. They have the purity of faith, understanding of God, simple God up there, man down here. And they come in and they destroy the cities, and they replace the effete Arabs in the cities. And then over time, 3 generations, again, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. 3 generations later, these Bedouin themselves have become effete and soft and are replaced by another group coming down from the hills. Now, I'm simplifying it very much, but this in essence is theory. And here you have the dynamic portion of Ibn Khaldun, which explains the movement in human society. And of course, you can apply this even today to nations and civilizations. You see these great nations, America and China and India. And in a very simplified, reductionist way, you're seeing Ibn Khaldun's thesis in play. You're seeing these nations rise, and a couple of generations later, you see the fall beginning, and you have the reasons these societies rise and fall. Now, within that, how do we deal with the understanding of God and the understanding of nature? I think for that, as Ibn Khaldun did, we have to refer to the earlier philosophers, where in great detail, those philosophers have given us so much rich legacy of being able to understand with our very limited minds the nature, the majesty, the greatness, the beauty of God. And I think Ibn Arabi explains that encounter beautifully, because to him, the purpose of life really is to appreciate and worship the majesty of God. And that is the ultimate purpose of life. So we are seeing a subtle shift from Ibn Arabi's notion of the purpose of life and what we are doing on earth, and Ibn Khaldun, who's talking much more what we would call scientifically. He's not bringing in so much theology as much as science. So he's saying, I can explain why these things happen. I can explain how these things happen. And he's so brilliant because he doesn't restrict this to North Africa. A lot of his material is from what's now Morocco, the Maghreb. But he's giving Greek references and Indian references and Central Asian references. But he gives enough data to us to know that there is this pattern. There is this pattern in history and society. And we can now, sitting here centuries later, apply this Khaldunian philosophy to the world that we are living in. One point, and I'll end with this, he does make, and that comes through clearly, is that there is a rise and fall. Now, centuries later, as you know, in the 20th century, scholars like Spengler actually use this concept, the rise and fall of societies. They in fact, use this in their titles, the fall of the West and so on. Toynbee used this concept. And Toynbee, by the way, as you know, called Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah, his introductory book, he said, this is the greatest book in human history written by any scholar at any time, anywhere in the world. What a compliment from the greatest Western historian. Toynbee is considered one of the greatest Western historians. So Khaldunian theory suggests that history itself, society itself, has, I would say, the seeds of its own destruction. And I was very amused when I visited Makkah last to see that one of the main boulevards, one of the main highways is called the Ibn Khaldun Avenue. And I was very amused because I wondered how many Saudis had actually read Ibn Khaldun and really understood him, because I think the Saudis with so much money and oil and so on have a sense that life goes on and this wonderful wealth and affluence will continue forever. But within that, there are always the seeds of ultimate decline and downfall. And that's the great lesson he has, which then leads us to humility. That leads us to a better understanding of ourselves and a better understanding of our position vis-a-vis God, certainly in the Abrahamic tradition, because the one thing all three religions of the Abrahamic faiths are unanimous about is the greatness of God, the omnipotence, the great, invisible, powerful God, and us here on earth, and that relationship. So no man can stand up and say, well, I'm like the pharaohs or Ozymandias who can say, I am like God, I am part of God. No man can say that within the Abrahamic tradition. So with that, Shaykh, I hope you don't mind my going on a bit, but I'm very passionate about the subject.
Wonderful. The thing is that I think constantly referring to God there and I here brings about again a blunt, if you like, and a cul-de-sac of duality. I don't see anything ever existing, including so-called creation, unless it is within that impossible to understand or fathom Godhood. So there is only God, everywhere, at all times, and not discernible specifically anywhere at any time. So, La ilaha illallah, wa huwa ma'akum aynama kuntum, and he is with you no matter who you are, where you are, what you are. So that sacred energy, light, whatever we call it, is what prevails throughout. That's it. So creation as we experience it now, or they did before, so is a little blip, something's low batteries, as a little blip only in, it is a little blip in the movement, if you like, of the so-called journey of the universe or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing is that we human beings have to resolve the issue as to who am I? Why am I here? Why do I fear death? You fear death because the real you doesn't die. Very simple. You feel death because you don't know what it is. Your soul never dies. It is only the imagination, it's your fantasy of your biography. Whatever is born will die. The divine in you, if you like, the spirit in you is not subject to changes, comings and going. It is absolute. As I said, it comes from, if you like, a quantum zone. We are not in a quantum zone. We're in physics, chemistry, and all of the changes. We have to accept this, deal with it, have science, technology, humanity, legalities in order to contain it. But it's only for one purpose, to transcend it, to know that the real you is not the so-called you. It has given rise to the so-called you for a little while, and time and space is a tiny little drop in the ocean of the infinitude of reality. So And this is where I think we can learn a lot from the example, in fact, of the historical thing of Ibn Khaldun, and go through the multitudes of dualities. And it doesn't need many generations. Within one generation, I can be that hard, if you like, nomadic type of thing who can come on a raid. I can also be very soft after a good time, after good, several years of comfort and ease. I can be so tolerant, so civilized and corrupt even. So it is there. I think to see it through the eye of oneness, we see dualities as the natural interplay of this tiny little world of ours, the tiny little earth amongst billions of galaxies. And here we make much fuss. And it may very well be that it is not reversible. We may have gone beyond the point of any way that we can remedy it. Doesn't matter. The thing is that, as you said so brilliantly, that there is a heritage we have, this mankind. We have this amazing, if you like, openings to aspects of reality, that there is always this contradictory dualities. You like to be soft and easy and comfortable and so on, but unless also you have certain measure of fighting spirit, virility, and all of that, then it will all be out of balance. It will be nothing other than decay. This is what I was hoping, I can develop more, inshallah we will, in that this is in our nature. If I become too harsh, I find a situation that is impossible. I have to return to the middle, ummatan wasata, middle people.
Yes. And Shaykh, you may recall Allama Iqbal's, he wrote a lot of beautiful poetry, the great poet of the East, as he's called, Allama Muhammad Iqbal. But to me, the two most fascinating poems of his are the Shikwa and the Jawab. And I love those because my favorite Qawwal is Sabri Qawwal, and you must, Abbas, please get a copy for the Sheikh. He'd love to hear it because they sing it in that enthusiastic spirit of the Qawwali. So it becomes it's a very moving piece of poetry. So the reason I'm quoting this is that Shikwa is man complaining to God. Correct. And he's complaining, and then legitimately he's saying, look, there's very powerful lines. He says, we conquered the East and the West, and we kept the faith, we kept the flame of Islam alive. And even under the very powerful line where he says, even under the blade, under the sword, we did not stop saying La ilaha illallah. Very powerful. And then right at the end, he writes the Jawab Shikwa, which is the answer to the Shikwa. And here is God answering man. And that is worth reading, Sheikh, because here God, and obviously we expect that of God, very sensible responses. He says, yes, I accept. Your ancestors were great. They were great warriors, they were great scholars, but what have you done? You sit with your hand upon hand and you just expect me to come and solve your problems and help you. And again, they're very powerful lines. And God says, one of you is a sheikh, and one is a sayyid, and one is a imam. There's only nothing but Islam. There's nothing but Muslim. Each one of you is a Muslim. Are you even aware that you're a Muslim? You're not a sheikh and a imam and so on. And then he ends, and this is what I want to quote, Sheikh, Ki Muhammad se wafa tune to hum tere hain. Ye jahan cheez hai kya loh kalam tere hain. Very powerful ending, but he says, he's showing us a path. You see, we know this problems we are facing. And throughout they have problems, and the Muslims complain throughout. You say, this is happening. In fact, one of the verses is, we sacrifice everything, we give up everything, and we get the lightning, the bijli falls on us, and our home is destroyed. And who do you favor? You favor the other people. So there's a very bitter strain running through it. And then when he gives these last lines, God is actually saying, I'm giving you a path. And Muhammad, of course, is a symbol. He's the Rasul Pak, is a symbol of humanity. He's been created according to the Quran as a mercy unto mankind. So he's saying, Ki Muhammad se wafa tune, if you're faithful to him and his vision of the world, to ye jahan cheez hai kya? What is this this universe you're chasing? What is this materialistic world that you're chasing? Ye jahan, this whole universe belongs to you. Law kalam tere, because I have given you knowledge. I have given you ilm. I've given you the whole universe. and you want to chase these material things, you want to build houses or have lands or have power. And that, I think, is a very powerful message for Muslims wherever they are. And again, and I think Iqbal came to that conclusion after he must have talked and thought about some of the issues that we are raising, legitimate issues, because Iqbal was also, as you know, a philosopher. He studied philosophy in Germany, and there were great debates he had in his mind with Nietzsche and all the great philosophers of Europe. So I think, Sheikh, this is a great initiative you've opened up, and I think we should continue talking, because hopefully some people will benefit, and hopefully we will be able to come nearer to finding the truth and moving closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and helping others, both Muslims and non-Muslims, believers and non-believers, because we must embrace all of God's creation. And that's something that I think sometimes is overlooked by the Abrahamic faiths, that God has emphasized that I have created all humanity and they're all precious to me and equal to me. And I have made you into different nations and tribes, different languages, different communities. And I think that is the most wonderful aspect of faith itself.
Indeed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To acknowledge our weakness, to acknowledge our human, if you like, which Allah says, I've flung you down from paradise. Yes. Because we are created in paradise. Our soul or spirit is parasitical. In other words, it is a gift beyond measure. And yet we are all the time trying to measure this and measure that, and he gave me more, I gave you less. And the Quran tells us in so many different ways, you won't have a touch of the truth unless you give up all.
Yes.
Unless you give up that which you love to keep and have.
Yes.
So because there is no you. The real you is a soul, is a spirit.
Yes, yes.
Once that happens, then tolerance becomes real. Patience becomes a joy, not a bitter thing. Then putting up with the others who are lesser becomes part of this life on earth. We are here for a while incarcerated the soul in this limitation, in this body. And that's all. Ayyukum ahsanu amala. So what am I doing with my day? What am I doing with the power I've been given? You know, how well have I entered into the absoluteness of the infinite silence and so on. Until such time I know every one of us is seeking a way to be secure in the knowledge, direct experience that Allah is in you, Allah is with you, Allah will guide you. But for that we need also like-minded, like-hearted people.
Well, that's Sheikh, why I was fascinated by Ibn Arabi because and his life really challenges all the stereotypes about Islam and Islamophobia. First of all, as you know, he has visions. He sees the great Abraham, Moses, the Prophet of Islam. He sees all three, and he sees the other prophets. But most important, the first vision he has is of Jesus, Isa alayhi salam. And he just falls in love with Isa, and he says, this is my guide, this is my friend. So of course he acknowledges our Prophet as Insan Kamil. But Jesus remains very close to him, so number one. Number two, he says, I will follow the path of Jesus, exactly what he did. And like Saint Francis of Assisi, who gave up all his clothes and his possessions, much to the chagrin of his father, and he wanders off as literally a mendicant Sufi. This is what Ibn Arabi does. He gives up everything and wanders off on the Sufi path from Andalusia to the east. And it'll be a long time before he comes briefly and then goes out again. So he spends half his life in the west, half in the east. So these are great role models for us, because for him, there's no Muslim, non-Muslim. He's embracing all of humanity and attracting humanity in the hope that he, through his lesson, through his own example, is able to help them move closer to their own inner, more noble self, which, as you are saying, is what we are created for ultimately. So Sheikh, thank you so much for this session.
Thank you. The biggest gift we have, especially I have, in my love and respect and admiration for someone like you, in that I see nothing other than the same light with a slightly different filters because of background, education, physical location, and exposure to the outer world and so on. And this is the gift that Allah had given us all through the ruh, that I see the same ruh. So that's why there is complete trust, unconditional trust, in that the being has conscience. And through that conscience will have the right wisdom. And through that right wisdom will come the right judgment. And then the earth will be safe for us to grow into our origin by effort. And that's the purpose of life, to rediscover the original infinite light by effort, by submission, by quietude, by disappearing from the so-called I. I am delighted and really I'm grateful to you. Thank you.
Shaykh, I'm honored, and I look forward to our future sessions. And I do want to thank again, Shaykh, your wonderful team, Mona and Abbas. They've done a great job, because really they worked very hard to put this together. And I know how much in demand you are and how popular you are, to sort of get hold of you and put you before a camera. I realize there's a great exercise in logistics. So, you know, this was ordained when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to happen, it happens, even at the cost of some very shaky curtains at the back, which kept me very nervous throughout the conversation. Inshallah, look after yourself, Shaykh. You're a blessing to us.
Thank you, thank you. We do what we can, and the rest we trust and trust and trust. And if the time comes that the curtains or everything collapses, I celebrate.
We are ready for it. We are ready for it.
We celebrate all the time, in that there is supreme perfect governance. Al-Hayy al-Qayyum.
Yes.
So nothing matters.
Yes, yes. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Bismillah, 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 bismillah.
Thank you, thank you.
You have all
so
love. You have my love and respect. Bismillah.
Thank you, Shaykh. It's very mutual. Thank you. Mona, have we passed or have we not passed?
Yes, actually, I would love to have more, because I feel somewhat thrilled sitting here listening, and privileged listening to this. Both of you have, I feel that you both put us on this shore, gazing at the wonderful, vast panoply of the heritage of all of our mystic philosophers, and awareness of all the sciences that are there, the knowledges, the insights, the inspirations, the role models of embodying this knowledge. And we need to have that rekindled. We have fallen into the mire of religiousness and forgotten the purpose of the vehicle of these spiritual paths. And it's all
Mona, that's one of the reasons I'm so impressed by the Shaykh, because over the years we haven't met, but we've been in touch, because when you have two souls with an affinity, as I have with the Shaykh, I've been following him, and I've been constantly moved that he's keeping the light, the candle of ilm alive, over different continents, different time zones, different problems, but he's kept it alive. And I've been very impressed by that. So I really am very grateful to participate in this. And Mona, what are you going to do with this? Will you have this printed out, or will you have it put out as an audio, visual? What are you doing with this?
We will share this.
We'd like to also use it at American University and share it with people.
We can transcribe it if you wish. Otherwise, we would just edit it ever so slightly, and have it put on YouTube channel, and then you can be sent. You can be sent the YouTube as well.
Yeah, and then we'll use that. Yes, that'd be perfect. That'd be perfect. My students would love to see this, and a lot of people now following the Shaykh, inshallah.
Well, I'm sure Shaykh Fadhlalla also welcomes further engagement at this level. It's exhilarating to be able to draw all these strands together and to distill from it what we can use ourselves here in the moment.
Well, Mona, as I told Abbas in a correspondence, and I've now referred to the Shaykh and the books that he preferred above all others, in a new book that's just coming out, and I finished it over the last few months, and I took advantage of the lockdown and being isolated. It's called The Flying Man. That's the example of Ibn Sina, his famous example. So it's called The Flying Man, Aristotle, and the philosophers of the golden age of Islam, their relevance today. So I'm taking the philosophies of these great philosophers and applying it to the world we're living in.
Alhamdulillah. Well, thank you both for this deeply, both of you come across with such humility and deep passion for haqq. So thank you both.
I have a lot of pride I am very, very proud in that Allah had put in me and in you and in him and in it min ruhi. How can we not be proud? Therefore, as humans, beyond humbleness.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, wonderful.
I love you, Dr. Ahmed. I respect you and I adore you. And inshallah, any excuse, we just sit with each other and disappear from the
Wonderful,
so-called
wonderful. I would love that. As your old student, I would love that, Sheikh. I would love that.
It's all about losing an identity by grace of reality itself.
Yes, yes. And
Only
disappear
that.
into something beyond our
It is,
normal life.
that is all what it is. That is the
Yes,
truth.
yes.
That is what Allah is. That's it.
Yes.
That's the gift.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Salam.
Thank you.
Salam.
Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum.
Bismillah.
شكرا. سلام.
Assalamualaikum.
Allah. Listen.